So we're on lesson 18 and 19 today. So lesson 18 is subtraction and equivalent expressions. So 18.1, you have negative 30 plus negative 10 is negative 40, because a negative plus a negative is still a negative. It's just deeper down into the negatives. And then you have negative 10 plus negative 30 is, again, that's the same thing. That's the commutative property. Negative 40. And you have negative 30 minus 10. So this minus a positive, you basically would, to turn into an addition sentence, do the opposite of the sign. So a subtraction sign, the opposite is addition. And the opposite of a positive, this is technically positive, is negative. So negative 30 plus negative 10 is negative 40. And then you have 10 minus negative 30. So you would turn these both into a positive sign. So 10 plus positive 30, which is equal to 40. So that's your positive and negative rules. So 18.2, Lynn and Kyron are trying to calculate this. Here is their conversation. Lynn says I plan to first add 7 3/4 and 3 5/6. So I will have to start by finding equivalent fractions with a common denominator. But Kyron said it would be a lot easier if we could start by working with the 1 3/4 and the 7 3/4. So can we rewrite it like this? Lynn says you can't switch the order of numbers in a subtraction problem like you can with an addition problem, because 2 minus 3 is not equal to 3 minus 2. 2 minus 3 is negative 1, and 3 minus 2 is 1, positive 1. So Kyron said that's true, but do you remember what we learned about rewriting subtraction expressions using addition? So 2 minus 3 is equal to 2 plus negative 3. So yes, those are the same because those both equal negative 1. So if we were to rewrite this like Kyron wants to write it, you would have to write it like this. Your subtraction sign will have to stay with the 1 3/4, looking like a negative sign. So you're adding the negative if you're going to switch it around. And that'll actually make it easier to calculate, a little bit easier. So write an expression that is equivalent to that expression, which I just showed you previously. It would be this. So this negative 1 3/4 is still negative. It just has a plus sign in front of the negative. So if you wrote the terms of your new expression in a different order, would it still be equivalent? Well, as long as it works as long as the subtraction or negative sign is moved along the number it represents, or the number that it's subtracting. So like if this is being subtracted, the negative is staying with it because that's the number that's being subtracted. And so that's also known as the commutative property. So number 1, write 2 expressions for the area of the big rectangle. So I have this times this plus this plus this. So the one expression would look like exactly what I said. 1/2 times 8y plus x plus the 12. This whole thing in the parentheses will equal to that length. So if I distribute this to each of them, 1/2 times 8 is 4. And keep your y. 1/2 times x is just 1/2 x. And then 1/2 times 12 is 6. So you're just cutting this into half. So those are your 2 expressions. And so now I have to use the distributive property to write an expression equivalent to this. So again, half of 8 is 4. So half of 8y is 4y. Half of negative x is plus a negative 1/2 x. And then half of 12 is 6. But you have that negative, so you're keeping that negative. And so that's what your expression would look like. And so now you have to use the property, distributive property, to write an expression that is equivalent to this expression. So I just do the same thing as these. Half times 8y is 4y. Half times negative x is negative 1/2 x. I'm just keeping that as the subtraction sign. And then this is 6, so minus 6. And so that's what that should look like as well. So you're just multiplying by each part in the parentheses. Moving on to lesson 19. You have expanding and factoring. So first we have these number talks, kind of helping you with the order of operations to remember that. So remember, you have to do multiplying before you add or subtract. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then you add that 2, and you end up getting 14. But first, for this one, you have to do the parentheses first and then multiply. So 2 plus 3 is 5. And then if you multiply that 4, that equals to 20. So now I have 3 times 4, which is 12 again. But the 2 is subtracting a 12. So if I have a smaller number minus the bigger number, well, 12 minus 2 is 10, but it's a negative. So the smaller number minus the bigger number will give you a negative answer. And so now my parentheses, 3 plus 4 is 7. And just like I said before, this will be a negative answer, and 7 minus 2 is 5. But it's negative because the smaller number comes first in that particular problem. So now 19.2, you basically have to write the factored form and the expanded form depending on what it gives you. This is your factored form because these two factors equals to this and these two factors equals to this. So I have negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and negative 3 times negative 2y is a positive 6y. Okay, so I have my 5 times a is 5a, and my 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. And so this, I have to find the common factor, the greatest common factor. So between 6a and 2b, my greatest common factor would be the 2. And now 2 times what equals 6y. So that's kind of like doing like this. You're dividing the 2 from 6a. Well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then a divided by nothing is a, or it's technically, yeah, so you just keep the a. Okay, that's kind of like what you're doing. So, minus 2 times what equals 2b? Well, 2 times b equals 2b. So negative 4 times 2w is negative 8w. Negative 4 times a negative 5z is a positive 20z. And then I kind of skipped it right here to re-show you how to do that. So 20x minus 10y plus 15z, they all have a 5 in common. So that goes on the outside of the parentheses. And on the inside, 20x divided by 5 will give you 4x minus 10y divided by 5 will give you 2y, and 15z divided by 5 will give you a 3z. So your answer would be 5 times 4x minus 2y plus 3z. So I want y'all to do these real quick. So if you did it, you have negative 2x plus 3y. And then this k gets distributed to both, so that's 4k minus 17k. This has a common denominator, or a common factor, I should say, of a. And so you have 10 minus 3 inside of the parentheses. Negative 2x times 3y is negative 6xy. Negative 2x times negative z is a positive 2xz. All these three have a b in common. So b times b times a is ab. B times c is bc. And b times 3d is 3bd. And then negative x times 3y is negative 3xy. Negative x times negative z is a positive xz. And negative x times a positive 4w is a negative 4xw. And so that's what your table should look like. So again, to find the expanded form, you just multiply what's on the outside of the parentheses by each part in the parentheses. To find the factored form, you just figure out what they have in common. So the greatest common factor. So for these two, 2 would be your greatest common factor. And so you know that 2 times 3a is 6a. And you know that 2 times b is 2b. And you just keep that minus sign right there. So whenever you're done with watching this video, you need to complete the lessons 18 and 19 practice problems assignment for practice. Bye.